Apple is lying about the iPhone 14. The perfect iPhone does exist. There is an iPhone 14 with a totally new design, no notch at all on the screen, a super high-end camera system with better zoom, Face ID and Touch ID, and maybe a folding option in there too. There's only one problem. You can never have it. Apple's got some big secrets, but I've also got some prototypes here to show off about those secrets and why maybe Apple is always right and that what we think we want isn't actually what we want. Maybe Apple's not the problem, but we're the problem.
This is the bezel for the iMac. When we remove the aluminium for the display in the center here, we actually take that material and then we can make two keyboard frames from it.
What you're watching here is extremely rare footage of one of Apple's most secretive locations in the world. This is Johnny Ive in Apple's top secret design studio. This is where the iMac, the iPhone, the iPad, all of Apple's biggest products and really the biggest products of the tech world, they were born right here. This is where they all started, and this is one of Apple's biggest secrets, this room, this space. And we've gotten little glimpses of this area before in some videos looking at, sort of mock-up floor plans and also some highly orchestrated photo ops. But what's so special about this place is not only, this is where Apple designs their latest and greatest creation, but this is where they make some of the best products in the world that will never ultimately see the light of day. And I am not an Apple insider. I don't know the ins and outs of all the secret things inside of Apple, but I can tell you this with 99% certainty. All of the Apple products we've ever wanted to see certainly exist in this design studio. There's a round Apple Watch on someone's wrist. There is a folding iPhone. There's a touchscreen Mac. There's a bigger iPad. Apple has made all of these top secret products, but they remain top secret to this day, just sort of sitting there in this spaceship in Northern California, never to be released, at least not yet. And when it comes to the iPhone 14, for example, this design we're seeing right here is basically finalized. This phone is coming out in about a month, and there's been a lot of criticism of what Apple is choosing to do and what they're choosing not to do. And I don't know about you guys, but I've certainly got a couple of questions and some critiques. Like, why 5 years after Face ID was first introduced, can they not shrink this tech any more than they have? Do we have to have this double hole punch system to make Face ID work? Or is this just sort of an aesthetics thing that Apple is choosing to do strictly for marketing purposes? Also, why can't we have both Face ID and Touch ID? We know this under-display fingerprint tech exists. It works really well. If anyone had the marketing budget and the R&D to make this magic happen, it would certainly be Apple. So why isn't it here on the iPhone 14? And when it comes to design, why do we still have basically the same design as the iPhone 12 and the iPhone 13, and still a lot of the same DNA from the iPhone 10 from 2017? Why hasn't Apple done a more radical redesign this year? These are all fantastic questions that unfortunately I do not have the answers to. At least I don't have good answers for them. We know that Apple is very meticulous in what they choose to do and what they choose not to do, and they're always trying to do things that are right for the customer and what we want, and they know best. But do they always know best? Because what we know about Apple is that they test multiple iterations of devices, and I'm sure the perfect iPhone 14 certainly does exist, but why can't we have that phone? Why isn't it real and in our hands and coming soon? And the answer to that requires a little bit of a detour, because we've got to talk about this Frankenstein touchscreen Mac. Yeah, the touchscreen Mac does exist, it's real, but this device just goes to show that maybe what we think we want isn't actually what we want.
Hello, this is Eve with MacMost.com, and I'm here with Nathan Oshidari.
Hi.
And he's going to show me the mod book. Oh my God, I'm so excited.
To tell you the truth, I can honestly dedicate an entire video to the history of this crazy thing because the story is fascinating and just plain jaw-dropping. It's the story of really cool breakthrough innovation, the top secret Apple black market in shady deals. It involves Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple, and also an alleged sort of campaign ripoff of a multi-million-dollar Kickstarter. There's a lot to unpack here, and if you guys do want to see that video, let me know in the comments down below. I would certainly love to make it, but putting that history aside for a moment, what does this weird Frankenstein touchscreen Mac have to do with the iPhone 14? Where's the connection between these two devices? I promise I will get there, but first, we gotta talk about why this product is so important and why ultimately we thought we wanted it, but honestly, it was sort of a flop.
Morning.
The original mod book was shown off back in 2007 at Macworld. And yes, if that sounds familiar, that was also the same event that this was shown off to the world for the very first time. And it was created as sort of a fan-made answer to fill a huge void in Apple's product lineup, and that was a touchscreen Mac. Apple had desktops, they had laptops, but this is way before the introduction of the iPad or any touchscreen Mac device, and a lot of people wanted a touchscreen Mac for various reasons. Maybe you wanted to have a pen or a stylus for doing illustrations, or you wanted to navigate around with a touchscreen, or you wanted a more portable, sort of compact Mac with touch capabilities. This was the answer, the mod book, and it was really crazy, but also really crazy cool. And remember, this launched well before the iPad and even before the iPhone, so users' expectations were a little bit different. They weren't expecting this sleek multi-touch device and sort of using, your finger to do these cool animations. They just wanted the functionality of a touchscreen Mac, even if that included a stylus. And when this launched, it was really cool. It was sort of the answer to what many people wanted, because Apple wasn't going to officially make it, but this guy here, he did. The mod book would go on to become a real product. People would actually buy these things and actually use them over the next several years, and believe it or not, it actually worked as advertised for the most part. Although the first version was literally just a MacBook with the screen removed, future versions did get better over time, and it delivered on the promise of giving you the full functionality, the full capabilities of Mac with a touchscreen layer on top, but with a few important caveats. Although Steve Jobs famously wasn't so keen on the use of a stylus.
You have to get them and put them away and you lose them. Yuck. Nobody wants a stylus.
The mod book required one to actually use it. It was using Wacom tablet technology as sort of the go-between to give the Mac that touchscreen functionality, and you had to use a stylus if you wanted to use this thing. Your finger is not going to work on here. And we actually have one here in our studio. I've actually gotten to play with this thing and test it. This is a mod book Pro. It's one of the later iterations, and it's crazy. This right here, it's a touchscreen Mac. And what's so fascinating about this is that not only is it cool to see this thing in the real world and to see what it would be like, but the more I played around with it, the more I understood why Apple took a different direction when it came to the iPad. Because remember, back when those first iPad rumors started to sort of flare up around 2009, 2010, we knew Apple was working on a tablet called maybe the iSlate. Everyone thought, assumed, and wanted a touchscreen Mac. They didn't want a blown up iPhone or a blown up iPod Touch with apps and just sort of that iPhone experience on a larger screen. They wanted a Mac. They wanted to run their own apps. They wanted the full Mac experience. They wanted the full Mac experience on a touchscreen they could take with them anywhere. At least that's what they thought they wanted. But the more I've used the mod book and the more time I've spent with it using a touchscreen Mac, the more I understand that the Mac just wasn't made for touch. This just wasn't the right move. And maybe Apple was right all along, even if we thought at the time they were making a really big mistake. And while I, and I'm sure many of you guys out there, us enthusiasts, would love to see a touchscreen Mac, I understand why Apple didn't do it, because it maybe made sense for 5% of people, but not for the other 95% of people out there who wanted a portable computer experience. The iPad just makes more sense in almost every single way. Even if it is a blown up iPhone experience, it still works really well. It's easier to load apps onto. The touchscreen experience is really nice to see. The iPhone familiarity is nice. So if you go from an iPhone to an iPad, it's sort of intuitive. You know what you're doing. It's easier to sort of run updates on. There's less risk of viruses or malware. The iPad for so many people just is way more easy to use and just makes way more sense than a touchscreen Mac. As much as I'd hate to say it, a touchscreen Mac, although we wanted it, was just maybe the wrong choice all along, at least for 95% of people. And when it comes to Apple in 2022, there are a lot of things that I want to see and things I think Apple should be doing to make better products. I'd love to see a round Apple Watch. I think this would look really, really cool. I want to see Face ID and Touch ID on the iPhone 14. I want to see an iPhone 14 with a better redesign and some kind of more substantial redesign, but as much as I want to see these things, maybe there is a good reason they do not exist, or at least they do not exist yet. I know many out there are quick to criticize Apple and think they're just doing things as a marketing ploy and they're doing things just to milk as much money they can out of the consumer, and sometimes I think that is actually a little accurate, but in a lot of cases, I don't think that's the case. I think Apple tested this stuff and it's just not good, or it's just not ready for prime time, or it works really well, but just not good enough to be consistent and give that Apple quality that we've all become accustomed to and what we honestly expect on every single Apple product. And look, I'm not trying to defend Apple here, not at all, but just to sort of give a little context to a very interesting story, because if Apple had listened to us and they had made a touchscreen Mac and the iPad never existed, the tablet space would be very different today. Who knows what would have happened? Maybe Microsoft would have taken over and a touchscreen Mac would have failed and flopped, and who knows what would have happened. But we know that Apple is certainly listening. Have no doubt, if you don't believe it, Apple is definitely listening to everything, the good stuff and the bad stuff, and I'm sure they are trying it. And we also know that Apple does work ahead on things. We know they're usually a generation or two ahead on the next iPhone and iPad and Mac, and maybe they're working to perfect the formula to make things better. And I can tell you, as cool as it is to play with a sort of semi-touchscreen Mac, and as cool as this hardware is, this does not at all hold a candle to this. And I think that Apple has shown us that the iPad, maybe at the beginning was a little weird, but certainly accomplished what Apple set out to do. And I'm curious, what are your guys' thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on the touchscreen Mac experience? Your thoughts on Apple as a whole? Do you think Apple is listening and they're making the right decisions and doing the right things? Or do you think they are doing things sort of maliciously to better market their products and to sort of milk as much money as possible? I'm curious, where do you think Apple stands on this? What are their intentions? And do you believe that what Apple is doing with the iPhone 14 is the right move or wrong move this year? Let me know your thoughts down below. As always, I appreciate you guys watching this video. Thank you so much. I'm Robert Rosenfeld from the Apple Circle. I'll see you all in the next one.